Hello. So just let me explain a little bit about the title because it's not actually not mine, but I took it from a report from a American paid business channel, and so I really like the title, which is China's pain and Vietnam gain with a question mark. So I will analyze the gain or loss of Vietnam um, during the trade war through four main aspects. The first one is the trade exposure, and um, and then I will analyze the impact of the trade war on Vietnam economy by the from the point of view of manufacturing as percentage of GDP and global value chain participation rate. And finally, I will take a look at foreign direct investment of other countries in Vietnam. And here, Vietnam in the Asian country, which is an association of Southeast Asian nations, is actually a poor country respect to other, but it has a GDP growth rate which is very higher than the others, and respecting to other country is a very open country, as you can see here. The percentage of export and import value on GDP is very high. It's more than 19. It's more than 90% of the GDP, and it has a very low inflation rate. So just to have a look at an overview of Vietnam import and export. Before 2012, Vietnam had the trade deficit until 2012, and after 2012, it has become a export-oriented country, and with very high percentage of import and export on GDP. And just to understand very quickly, which are the goods that Vietnam export and import from other country, we can see here that the most export goods from Vietnam to other country is telephones and their components. Also, textiles is a very strong good from Vietnam export of view. And regarding to the import, Vietnam imports the major part from other countries, the intermediate goods which are then used as input to its manufacture. And so how is the impact of the trade war on the Vietnam trade? Here, yeah. Here you can see, so in general, the economies that are most exposed to the trade tensions are the countries that has stronger relations with China and US. And here, Vietnam is in the third position, respecting to other South Asian country regarding to the trade exposure to China. And to take a deeper look on in which industry Vietnam has more impact, like from gain or loss from the trade war. So here I have analyzed the four main industry in Vietnam, and textile and consumer goods industry might have a gain from this trade war. Meanwhile, the machine part and components, and also steel may lose from the trade war because as geographic position, Vietnam is very close to China. So the textile industry might gain from this trade tension, but still is an industry which is influenced very heavily from the tariff applied from the Trump administration, and as one of the top 10 exporters of steel in the US, Vietnam suffer a lot from the tariff from the US. Regarding to the dominance of manufacturing sector and integration in global supply chain, Vietnam, respecting to other Southeast Asian country, has lower percentage of manufacturing as a part of GDP. So from this point of view, it is very hard to say or to analyze, or it's difficult to say that the trade war may have an impact on Vietnamese economy because it doesn't have a very high percentage of the manufacturing sector in contributing to the GDP as a total. However, for the global value participation rate, the position of Vietnam is in the middle. So it's kind of it has a kind of mixed valuation, I can say, because usually country that has the manufacture industry that more plug into the global value chain will suffer more or will have more visible impact from the trade war than the country that has the manufacturer sector that doesn't have a strong relation with the other countries. So even from this point of view, it's very hard to say now that trade war will have an impact, visible and invisible impact on Vietnamese economy. And to have a full picture of the economy and the impact on Vietnam economy, I also put some data from the FDI in Vietnam. So you can see South Korea Republic is the biggest investor in Vietnam, and the second place is Japan. Meanwhile, China and United States are in the top 10s, but not strong as South Korea or Japan. And the manufacturing dominate the FDI stock in Vietnam. However, as Professor Graziani said before, it's very difficult to see the impact of the trade war, which is a very recent story from the FDI point of view, because it will have, in my opinion, it will have more impact in the future. So just take a look at the FDI flow in Vietnam from 2008 to 2018. You can see more or less a gradual growth of FDI in stock in FDI inflow, in Vietnam. So it's very hard to say if the trade war bring more investor in Vietnam or it takes the investors from Vietnam for now. So I think we will have to wait for other data, and I will deep dive this aspect in my thesis. However, I found a article on internet that talk about the FDI inflow in Vietnam in the first half of 2019, and it said that there were more number of projects in Vietnam, but actually the net value of FDI in stock in the first half of 2019 was lower than the first half of FDI inflow in Vietnam in 2018. So it's kind of very interesting aspect to deep dive, and for now it's hard to say which is the reason of this trend in FDI inflow. And in some to measure the impact of the trade war in Vietnam, it's easier to use the trade exposure and the integration in global supply chain index to measure the impact of the trade war. And it seems that Vietnam gain in some industry and lose in some other industry. So the impact in some is both negative and positive. And then, however, regarding to the foreign direct investment, it's very interesting to analyze if the trend of investing in Vietnam is a consequence of the strategy that called China Plus One, which is the trend of the company to move lower goods. I mean lower value goods in Vietnam, and the China will develop in high end or high tech goods, and because of the lower labor cost in Vietnam, so that the companies move to Vietnam to benefit the lower labor cost, or because all the companies move to Vietnam because of the consequence of the trade war. It's very difficult to say which is the main reason of the movement of the companies, for foreign companies in Vietnam. So I would deep dive on my thesis to understand better if it's a inevitable trend from China in Vietnam, or is more influenced by the consequence of the trade war. And now I will give my words to Professor Nini.
Okay. I propose you, how to say, the study of a case, a particular case that is very important in the US situation. And the case is the case of solar panels and solar cells, and it is one of the most important issues. It was already began with the Obama administration that introduced anti-dumping duties on the Chinese solar panels in order to defend the American industry, American firms, and thinking that, demonstrating, if you want, that Chinese firms received a subsidy from a Chinese government. But this attempt of the Obama administration failed for a very simple reason. First of one, Chinese firms began to outplace part of their capacity, their production to other countries. Pay attention. The most important country in the case of solar panels is Malaysia. Malaysia is the most important exporter of solar panels and solar cells to the United States, even more than China, even more. But it is made by Chinese firms that placed there in 5 years ago, if you want, 4 years ago. And the second is that the second reply of Chinese, of course, is to reduce prices more than the increase of tariffs. And this was explained by some features of the Chinese approach in the case of solar panels. The reduction was of prices was due to vertical integration of the of Chinese firms and to scale economies. Chinese enterprises are giant, absolutely giant. So that Chinese market share in the world at the world level is 70% of the world market in the case of solar panel. So we arrived to the Trump administration. The Trump administration decided that at the beginning of the 2018 to pose the so-called safeguard tariffs on solar. The tariffs are decreasing in 4 years, first year 30%, 25%, 20%, and after 15%, plus than steel and plus than aluminum. And after, more recently, there were targeted tariffs. Which is the difference between these? Safeguard tariffs and targeted tariffs. Safeguard tariffs are tariffs referring to everyone, every country, while target tariffs are referred only to Chinese products. Okay? Well, why this happens? Look at this picture. I don't know if you are able to understand or to see even this picture, but this is the beginning of the century. The beginning of the century, the first one enterprise in the panel situation was a Sharp Solar. Sharp is a Japanese enterprise. BP, Kyocera, that is another Japanese. So there were no Chinese enterprises. 5 years after, there is still a Japanese situation. The increase of the presence of the German enterprises, Qcells, and to arrive to Chinese explosion, we arrive to at the end of the first decade of the century. In that period, the most important, the largest enterprise in the panel solar is the one American enterprise, First Solar. So from Japan to United States, First Solar. In that period begins the industrialization of the large industrialization of Chinese activities, operations in the solar case. Please pay attention. In that year, the amount of the domestic market in China in terms of capacity explained only 5% of the total capacity of the enterprise. 95% were for exports. After, you find Chinese enterprise, and last year, of 10 enterprises, 8 enterprises are Chinese. Canadian Solar is a Chinese enterprise operating in Canada, while Anhua Qcells is a Korean enterprise, and First Solar is the last of the 10 enterprises. So you find the passage from Japan to the United States to China, absolutely. Well, what is the role of Vietnam in this? Nothing. Practically nothing. So You can see here the 20 largest enterprises in the world. And here I searched in the websites of every enterprise which was the weight of subsidiaries of these enterprises in Vietnam. I found only in this case, I mean 5 enterprises, very few, very few. So solar panels were not important in the Vietnamese case. Up to now. That is anecdotal information, newspapers, or information coming from Chinese Chamber of Commerce. Chinese producers are shifting a part of their products in Vietnam. In the first quarter of this year, Vietnam becomes the #1 destination for Chinese solar panels. They account for 17% of the Chinese solar exports. Pay attention, there is no solar electrical energy in Vietnam. The first one was some months ago. So the total electricity in Vietnam is made by hydroelectricity and coal. But as a reply to the trade war, the Chinese depriced in this month, only in this month, a large part. Yes. Solar, I am referring to solar panels now. I am referring to solar panels, but they are assembled in Vietnam. Yes, of course, because they are. Yes. And they account for the growth rate of the exports from China to Vietnam of solar panels is 24,000%. So, absolutely impressive figure. So Vietnam becomes now becomes the destination of solar export to be re-exported to the other countries, and particularly in the United States. Of course, you can find some effects on the US market and on the Chinese market. Very simple, in a very simple case, which are the results. On the US markets, it is the effects are mixed, if you want. 5 minutes. It's a very large amount of time. Don't worry. Okay. And the prices are increasing. Notice a very important issue. When we are speaking of a source of energy, relative prices are important because we can pass from one kind of energy to another kind of energy. So it is important. There is a substitution, possibility of substitution, and it can, hit also the total industry, including the industry, the American industry, which Trump wanted to defend. And in the case of Chinese market, a characteristic of Chinese market is practically to look more than before to the domestic market, because you know that the last 5-year plan in China as environmental protection as a particular, very particular top place.
One question.
Just a moment, because I have finished. Okay, you can question because this is my thanks. So you can have the questions.
More than a question is a comment that other than the last 13 plan, actually now in terms of environmental protection,
Yes.
there is the China 2025, which push a bit further also
Yeah.
the environmental quest and also the electrical mobility and sustainable.
Of course, yeah, also. But now, sun energy, solar energy is around 2% of the total capacity. And you know that the market for electrical vehicle in China is increasing very much, but a very, of course, a very small part of them. It's okay?
But do you really see a trend of like a Chinese solar panel assembled in Vietnam and exported to the US? Because this should be against the trade and investment framework from the Vietnam and US. They have, according to rules of origin that apply anyhow to FIFA, they cannot assemble single solar panel in Vietnam and
Yes.
export them to the US. So I'm really doubting that this can really happen. It's like it's completely against all WTO rulings and all the rules that this like Vietnam was the TIFA agreement with the US and accessory to the WTO if they're doing so.
Was told by newspapers and by Chinese Chamber of Commerce, so it is, how to say, an information. In this information, the message was that this was a measure to bypass the country of origin rule. I don't know if it is right or not. It is right or not because what I wanted to tell you is that this trade war meant in the particular case of solar panels a very drastic change, So a lot of Chinese are trying to bypassing rules of origin rights.
Yeah, but if they do only the assembly in Vietnam, value added that in Vietnam is not enough to bypass the rules of origin. So it's like if all the components are coming from China and all the value added is Chinese, if you just do the assembly, like the iPhone, it's like it's not a product of China. The value added produced in China is zero. They
Yeah.
import the camera from Germany, the battery from another country, the screen from other. Like this is not a product of China. It's just assembled in China, and that's why they can export it right now because it's not a product of China. The same thing is for the solar panel. If actually they are all built with components built in China and then they are shipped in Vietnam and then assembled in Vietnam, this product is 100% Chinese. It's like the value added produced in Vietnam is just, yes, it's going to be like a few dollars out of $1,000 of the value.
I don't think that is a very scarce amount, but in the general terms, I agree with you, but because I don't know what is the different information from this. It told that it is an attempt of the Chinese enterprise to bypass, but I don't know how.
Can you imagine what I said before? There are two ways of to sell the whole product. Send and then rename it, relabel it, and that's I guess. And the other one is to knock it down.
Even that.
Okay, no, knock it down. Then you knock it down, you sell parts of the solar panels, seeds, 90
enter in Europe because yen is produced in Japan. And so, according to rules of origin, the value of the car is the engine. It's more than 30% of the value of the car. These cars will face a 25% tariff entering in Europe. Japan is already closing most of the factories in the UK because they are so scared about what will be the repercussions.
However,
Thank you. Sorry, there is Pompeo has a question.
Yes. So my point was really to put these things in connection with Giovanni's paper before, because you had that Vietnam had been increasing exports, and my question, my idea was, well, which part of those exports are actually export from Vietnam or export from Chinese firms who have invested in Vietnam and then exporting. So I'd like to put the two things. This seems to suggest that those figures of Vietnam increasing was actually part of the Chinese production there. And also, as for what you are saying about this rule of origin, etc., I don't know much about this, but I do know that many made in Italy products are actually produced abroad. They come to Italy. In Italy, it's sufficient to make the box, to shape the box in the way in which you sell it, and that is you are actually allowed to put made in Italy. I have people who do this, and they say, we receive this production there, we simply put in a box, and then we put made in Italy.
And that's where the production is done. If it's done in Europe, this is disregarded because tariffs are applied outside the EU borders. So it's like, you can call it as a product. Yeah, but we can also discuss it later for like during lunch.
Yes, please. Just a very brief question
Yes.
from Giovanni Balse.
No, just to
Then we have to shift to the next one.
clarify that point, because as far as I know, in implementing the local content as a rule of origin on the ground, it is very complicated. It is not so simple, and it's especially relevant in case of regional integration. NAFTA, for example.
Yeah, but they have it.
Yeah. So I wonder whether you refer to simply U.S. regulation or to European or North American. I know that the implementation is extremely complex, but that the principle is important.
Can we sum
Thank
it up
you.
in this way? It depends on where you are going to export it.
Sure, it's a good summary. I think we have to go to the next presenter.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We have now Michael Blanc-Gabe
okay.
from ECARES, Université Libre de Bruxelles, with a very long title, Betting on the Wrong Horse, Lobbying on TPP and 2016 US Presidential Election. It's the most difficult title of the whole workshop.
I'm sorry for that. Also, the most
To
difficult name,
insert in the program.
and the
to
most
present-
difficult name probably as well.
No, the name is never a problem.
It's never a problem.